Okay, so I decided to come here. Well, not come here to a park to make this, even though I'm screen recording. And basically, this is just another example of how the Cash for Kids system, well, no, how the mental health system is one of the biggest parts of the Cash for Kids system. So basically, what's happening right here is the usual thing where somebody gets a mental label, and of course mental illness comes from trauma anyway, and then it's used against them. But surprisingly here, what happened is the kid actually ended up getting a PTSD diagnosis underage, which is really, really rare. In fact, I found out, when was this? I think this was last year. I found out that actually at one point I did get a PTSD. Wait, no. I got something close to that. It wasn't PTSD. It was something traumatic stress, but it wasn't PTSD. I found out that I actually did get one of those diagnoses at one point, but of course I was just never told about it. But anywho, so this lady says my ex-husband and my children's father has schizophrenia. My daughter, 20, was diagnosed with schizophrenia at the age of 12, but recently her diagnosis was changed to PTSD and depression with psychotic features. And so, I guess I could go ahead and stop right there. I can only imagine how much the diagnosis was used against her and all the stuff that was able to happen. And then the whole time she had PTSD, which of course, when I started learning more about mental labels and all that and piecing everything together, I realized that not only does all mental illness come from trauma, but some mental illnesses are direct off branches of complex trauma or CPTSD. So personality disorders, but they depend on whether you choose the victim complex or different things like that. Basically, which side you choose kind of makes you get whichever personality disorder you get, but they all still are off branches of complex trauma. And then it was something else. Oh yeah, ADHD, and then schizophrenia is also another off branch of complex trauma. So it makes sense that people would get diagnosed with schizophrenia instead of CPTSD. Because, one thing that they really don't want to do is diagnose people with both. That's something that they seem to really not want to do. And then with the whole age thing, they'll say things like, well, I don't want to diagnose you with PTSD or CPTSD yet. Because, for one, of course, you're still in the situation, and it's 9 times out of 10, or really 10 times out of 10, it's your abusers who are giving you the trauma mental problems that are taking you to the mental health professionals. So they're not going to want to give you a diagnosis of anything related to trauma specifically, even though really all mental illness comes from trauma, but they don't admit that. They're not going to want to do that while you're still in the abuse situation, because they're making money off of your abuse situation. Because not only was the mental health system and a lot of the Western medical system all about eugenics and started off for eugenics, but also it's really there to profit off of people's trauma, and then also make sure you don't actually get better, because they're not curing anybody. That's one thing about this. They're not curing anybody. And so, okay, wait a minute. Psychotic features. Today, my son, 15, who was diagnosed with ASD at the age of 6, received a new diagnosis of schizotypal personality disorder. I don't know what I'm asking for exactly by posting all of this. I'm just feeling overwhelmed and confused. And you'll notice with these victim complex women is that they never actually think about how the kids feel. They're always talking about how they feel about the situation and how overwhelmed they feel. But yet, the thing, somebody just looked back at me while I'm recording this. This probably wasn't a good spot to do this. But anyway, it's always about them. It's never about the kids. And I can only imagine all the abuse and trauma they went through that actually led to them getting the mental problems they have. Because, of course, mental illness comes from trauma and generational trauma. But they want to try to do this genetic thing. In fact, no, they don't even do the genetic thing that much. What they really try to make it seem like you just walk outside one day and then you get bipolar disorder or whatever, like it's a cold or something. That's what they really like to do. They don't even really like to do the genetic thing that much, because then if they really do the genetic thing, that means that the abusers who are taking their kids to get mental labels will have to they'll have to tell them, well, if they have it, they being the kid, you must have it too. But of course they don't want to do that because they don't want to lose money. So they rather do they just caught whatever out of nowhere thing. And so then you'll see that the people in the comments section are just uplifting the victim complex, because of course groups like this, which this is actually a private group, groups like this are always going to be filled with Munchausen women with a victim complex. You rarely even really see dudes in groups like this, because it's not really that common for dudes to have Munchausen's anyway. But yeah, so this person said, "Oh, Angie, you've been through so much." I don't know what the DI means. Had a working diagnosis of schizotypal personality disorder when she was a teenager, and she fit many of the symptoms. Eventually, with a lot of talk therapy, she was officially diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder and PTSD. Now, I don't really know what reactive attachment disorder really means, but I'm assuming it's like a term for one of the different attachment disorders you get from trauma. So like avoidant attachment, fearful attachment. I think that's the same thing. And it's a couple other ones. It was avoidant, hold up, avoidant, fearful. There was something else that I can't remember. So yeah, that would mean that somebody that was supposed to be there for what she said this was for the daughter. So like basically one of the parents wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing, and the daughter felt abandoned, and then it gave her attachment problems. But of course, there's never any accountability in these types of situations ever. Never any type of accountability. And that's why you get cultures of people basically where there's a whole bunch of dysfunction because nobody has any accountability. And you'll always notice that in these types of cultures there's also an issue with child abuse being uplifted and nobody doing anything about it. And so somebody else said, "Oh my gosh, how much can one family endure? So sorry." And then somebody else said, "Angie, I know we don't know each other beyond Facebook, but if you ever want someone to talk to, even if it's just about gardening, you can message me. My daughter is almost 20, diagnosed schizoaffective disorder at age 12, but had symptoms younger." And that's something that I've noticed with this type of stuff. It's like the mental health system is really just all about opinions. That's really what it's all about. It's kind of like basically Christianity. It's one book, but most people don't believe the book, so then they start having their own little side groups, or what do they call denominations, where they take out one part of the book, but then they believe some other part. It's basically like that, because it's like, I was told, of course, way after the whole diagnosis thing happened, that you can't even have schizophrenia at 12, but apparently it does happen often for people to be diagnosed younger. And then what else was it? What else was I? Oh yeah. So it's like one psychiatrist may not want to diagnose somebody with something due to age or because they have one other label. So like even though one of the problems I would have actually had was BPD, one person told me they wouldn't even want to acknowledge that because they wanted to put ASD, since my mom had got ASD put back on paper recently. So he was like, I'd rather do the ASD than the BPD. And then there's some people that don't want to diagnose both of those at the same time, even though you can have both. So it's like, but wait a minute. They didn't want to diagnose, well, no, not even diagnose. They didn't want to acknowledge the BPD at this specific place. But there were other people in there who had the label. But then, okay, so there's two other people in this specific facility with the BPD label. But then there was this other girl in there that they said they didn't want to give her the BPD label because she was too young. But she was the same age as one other person with it, and then older than another person with it. And it's just a whole bunch of mess. It's like this whole system's just based off of crazy opinions. That's really all it is opinions. And I'm trying to think about if I have anything else to say. I don't really think I do. Or if I do, I'll make a part 2.